If I hadn't checked my mailbox that morning, I might never have found out Karen was trying to steal my pool. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in a gated community where things are usually calm. The kind of place where dogs bark at sprinklers and neighbors wave while mowing their lawns. You know, normal. But all of that changed when Karen moved into the house 2 doors down. At first, she seemed all right. She introduced herself with a tray of stale cookies and a comment about how my hedges could use a trim. Passive-aggressive, but manageable. I didn't think much of it until one hot Saturday afternoon when she showed up at my door with a clipboard and a fake smile. "We need access to your pool," she said, as casually as if asking for sugar. "It's going to be a community amenity from now on." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Karen explained, if you could call it that as a new HOA board member, she had voted for my private backyard pool to be open for community use during weekends. She said it would improve neighborhood relations and boost property values. I laughed. "That's not how this works. That pool is on my deed property. It's not community anything." Her smile dropped faster than my patience. "I'm afraid you'll need to comply, or the board will take necessary action." That's when I realized this wasn't just a suggestion. It was a demand. I said no, firmly and clearly. I shut the door. The next morning, I found a printed notice taped to my mailbox. It was labeled, "Community Pool Use Schedule," with my address listed under, Facility A. My blood boiled. I stormed to her house and told her to remove it immediately. She just smirked and said, "We'll see what the law says." Later that evening, I was grilling in my backyard when 2 kids I'd never seen before tried to climb the fence to my pool. I shouted at them to leave, and one of them yelled, "Karen said we could come swim." That's when I knew she wasn't going to stop. The next day, the police were at my door, not for trespassing, but because Karen had filed a complaint against me for intimidating neighborhood children. That was her big mistake. The knock on my door was firm. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch, one with a notepad, the other with that look cops get when they think you've done something wrong. "Mr. Daly?" the taller one asked. "Yes. We've had a report about an incident involving neighborhood children. Mind if we come in?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I'd rather we talk right here." "What incident?" He checked his notes. "A woman named Karen reported that you yelled at children and made threatening gestures while they were trying to enjoy the neighborhood pool." I blinked in disbelief. "You mean my pool? The one behind a locked gate on my private property?" The other officer looked at his partner, then back at me. "She didn't mention it was private." I led them around the house, showed them the fence, the signs, the security camera above the garage. Then I pulled up footage on my phone of the 2 kids climbing the fence while Karen stood on the sidewalk watching and saying nothing. The officers looked at each other again. One of them actually sighed. "Mr. Daly, we're sorry to bother you. Based on this footage and your property boundaries, there's clearly no crime here. If anything, you've got trespassing on your side." I nodded. "Thanks. Can I press charges?" They said that would be tough since the kids were minors and likely didn't understand the situation, but they did agree to file a report. Before they left, one officer gave me a piece of advice: if she keeps this up, start documenting everything. She's testing you. I didn't have to wait long. That night, I installed a second camera facing the sidewalk. I also printed out a copy of my property survey and left it by the door in case any more surprise guests arrived. The next morning, Karen was in my driveway, clipboard again. She didn't even flinch when I walked out holding the survey papers. "I've notified the HOA of your noncompliance," she said. "We'll be holding an emergency meeting this week. If you don't show up, we'll interpret that as surrender of rights." I laughed out loud. That's not how property law works. She narrowed her eyes and took a step closer. "You'll regret this. The neighborhood wants that pool." I said nothing. Just stared her down until she turned and walked away. But that warning stuck with me. She wasn't giving up. She was just getting started. The so-called emergency HOA meeting took place 3 days later, held in Karen's living room. Of course, I almost didn't go, but after what she pulled with the police, I wasn't about to let her twist facts in my absence. When I arrived, the room was packed tighter than a clown car. Karen was seated in the center like she was queen of the cul-de-sac. 3 other board members sat on a sofa, looking equal parts bored and uncomfortable. Folding chairs lined the walls, occupied by a mix of curious neighbors and a few of Karen's friends who had clearly been coached. She stood as I walked in and gestured dramatically. "Ah, Mr. Daly has graced us with his presence." I ignored the jab and took an empty seat. Karen immediately launched into what she called the issue of underutilized resources. In times of rising energy costs and limited community facilities, she said, pacing like a motivational speaker, it is only fair that all residents have equal access to shared assets, like the community pool. I raised my hand. There is no community pool. You're talking about my private property. She didn't even blink. A resource unused is a resource wasted. You only swim in it, what, twice a week? We're proposing a fair use rotation system for weekends and holidays. You'll be compensated with reduced HOA dues. The room murmured. Some people nodded. Others just looked confused. I stood up, pulled out the printed survey map from my folder, and held it high. Let me make this clear. My pool is on a parcel of land that is exclusively mine. It is not governed by HOA jurisdiction. You can't vote to take it. You can't schedule it. You can't even look at it without my permission. Karen laughed, but it was forced. You're being unreasonable. This isn't about ownership. It's about community spirit. No, I said firmly. This is about you trying to control something that doesn't belong to you. One of the board members finally spoke. Karen, I think we need to review the bylaws before we move forward. That's when she lost it. Are you seriously going to side with him? He yelled at children. He installed surveillance. He's acting like a paranoid hoarder. I smiled. And you called the cops with a fake report. Want me to read the case number out loud? Dead silence. Karen's face went red. She grabbed her clipboard and stormed into the kitchen. Meeting over. But I knew better than to celebrate. People like Karen don't give up when they lose. They escalate. The HOA meeting may have ended in embarrassment for Karen, but the storm was far from over. For a few days, everything was oddly quiet. No passive-aggressive notes on my mailbox. No clipboard sightings, not even her yappy little dog barking on her porch. That silence, it wasn't peace. It was planning. I kept my cameras running. Every day, I checked the footage and walked the perimeter of my yard. I even started locking the gate around my pool, something I'd never done before. I could feel it in my gut. She was waiting for the right moment. It came on a Sunday afternoon when I was at my brother's place across town for a barbecue. I got a motion alert on my phone around 3:17 p.m. At first, I thought it was just a raccoon or a bird triggering the camera, but when I opened the live feed, my heart stopped. Karen was in my backyard. She'd climbed the fence, scratched her leg in the process, and was now holding her phone up, taking pictures of the pool, the deck, the pump system, everything. She even walked over to the back door and tried the handle, locked. Then she looked straight into the camera and smiled. I sped home. By the time I pulled into the driveway, she was gone. But the muddy footprints on my deck and the broken fence latch told the story well enough. I called the cops immediately. This time, I wasn't asking about pressing charges. I was demanding them. The officers came, reviewed the footage, and took my full statement. One of them actually whistled when Karen's face appeared on the video feed. Well, he said, this is definitely trespassing. She also attempted unlawful entry. That's serious. I gave them the timeline, the footage, even the scratches on the fence post she'd snagged her khakis on. They told me they'd be following up with her directly and encouraged me to file a restraining order. That night, as I sat on my patio with my laptop and a cold drink, Karen had the audacity to walk her dog right past my driveway, eyes locked on me. She paused, like she was waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. I just held up my phone, flashed the camera feed, and said loud enough for her to hear, "Nice pants. Hope you kept the receipt." She stormed off without a word, but I knew she wasn't done. Because 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA board. Karen had filed an official petition to have my pool declared a community asset, and she had signatures. The certified letter was laughable if it hadn't been so bold. Karen's petition claimed that, due to the placement, size, and potential benefit of Mr. Daly's pool to the surrounding households, it should be designated a shared neighborhood resource. There were 10 signatures attached. I recognized 2 names, both people who rarely left their houses. The rest? Karen's friends, her poker group. One of them didn't even live in the neighborhood anymore. It was a last-ditch power grab, but she just handed me the rope. I made 2 calls that morning, one to my lawyer and one to the county zoning office. Then I got to work collecting everything, the video footage, the trespassing report, the phony HOA meeting minutes Karen had drafted, and copies of every complaint she'd filed against me. Every one of them dismissed. My lawyer loved it. He said it was one of the easiest cases he'd ever seen. Then came the HOA hearing. Unlike the circus at Karen's house, this one was official, held in the clubhouse with all 5 board members present and the HOA's actual attorney in the room. Karen walked in like she was the main event, wearing a blazer and carrying a binder like she was auditioning for a legal drama. I didn't say much at first. I let her talk. She went on and on about neighborhood unity, unused space, and how I was hoarding luxury in a community that deserved better. Then it was my turn. I calmly handed each board member a folder. Inside, the security footage, the police report, photos of the fence damage, and a signed affidavit from my property attorney confirming the pool was completely outside HOA governance. And then I dropped the bombshell. I've also filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board, I said, for attempted illegal reclassification of private residential property. The room froze. The HOA lawyer cleared his throat and said, "This meeting is over. Mr. Daly, you're fully within your rights. Karen, please see me after." Karen exploded. She shouted, called the board cowards, said I had sabotaged the vision. She even tried to storm out, only to be stopped by the HOA's attorney, who calmly informed her she was no longer on the board, effective immediately. Misuse of power. Abuse of HOA resources. False filings. She was done. Since then, my pool's been peaceful. The kids don't climb the fence. The letters stopped. Karen's house listed for sale 2 weeks later. I still swim twice a week, just like before, but now I've added something new to my schedule, waving at the "for sale" sign every time I pass it. If you've ever had to deal with a nosy neighbor or a power-tripping HOA like Karen, hit that like button because you know the struggle is real. Got a wild HOA horror story of your own? Drop it in the comments. I read them all. And trust me, some of you outdo even Karen. And if you want more real-life revenge tales and satisfying takedowns like this one, don't forget to subscribe. You're not going to want to miss what happened when Karen tried to come back one last time.